Three men in polos walked up our gravel drive like they were delivering a pizza, only their clipboards had that look people use when they want to make trouble look official, and my mother was sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, slow as a Sunday. I remember the sound of the gravel, the way her hand trembled on the mug for a second, and the sudden, stupid, hot anger that shot through me, the kind that wakes you up and feels older than you are. That was the moment I knew this wasn't going to be one of those small, forgettable fights you sweep under the rug. It was the opening of something that might take everything she'd ever built. My name's Cal Whitman. For the last year, I'd been bouncing from job to job, hauling prefab walls, and doing contract work across the country, a cowpoke of a contractor, I guess, living out of a truck and a tool bag. Red Pine Hollow has been my family's place for as long as anyone remembers. 11 acres of pines, a sagging barn, a shoreline the county never bothered to name, and my mom, June, has run it like it was a small sovereign nation. She paid the taxes, kept the records, and drove me crazy telling me to eat more vegetables. She did not answer to a homeowners association, she did not rent out her shoreline, and she most certainly did not have 3 polo shirts walking up the drive to tell her what color of flowers were acceptable. They claimed they were inspecting HOA violations. They pointed at a weathered barn door and at the bird bath with a look like they'd found a terrorist cell. One of them, the tallest, with a clipboard that looked like it had never seen dirt, said, "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to remove this structure. Standard procedure." He smiled the way people smile when they know they're lying. My mom blinked, and I could see her counting her options. I could see the years and the lines around her eyes. I could also see how tired she was of doing the worrying for both of us. So I did the only American thing left that felt right in me. I walked out to the porch. I didn't run or shout. I just stepped into the sun, hands loose at my sides, and let them know this was our land. The tall one tried to be charming. Charm falls apart when someone with a tool belt hangs at his hip. He kept insisting, "We're just enforcing HOA bylaws." I asked him for paperwork, county records, an association charter, anything with an official seal. He flipped the clipboard like a magician, produced a laminated sheet with an embossed logo I didn't recognize and not a single signature. "We're contracted by the Oakfield Association," he said. Oakfield, a name that didn't belong to any county map around here. When you see someone lie flat out, you can watch it happen in their eyes. The tall one got annoyed. One of the others, shorter, squat, with a jaw like a knuckle, stepped forward and said, "We can make this easy, son. You cooperate, this goes smooth." His voice had that cheap velvet used in threats. I felt my mother's hand tighten on the porch armrest, and something in me that tries real hard not to break things quietly cracked. I told them, slow, "You walk off this property right now, or I call the sheriff." The tall one laughed like I told a joke. The squat one didn't laugh. The squat pulled a folding knife out like it was the final argument in a bad play. Everyone freezes when something that sharp shows up. It does something to the air. He flicked it open, like showing the price of a promise. "You don't want this to get ugly," he said. 2 things happen in those seconds. 1, your heart does a ridiculous drum solo and thinks it can outrun decisions. 2, you remember how many years your mom spent sweeping porches and how much stubbornness it takes to keep a small place afloat. I moved before I thought. I don't tell that to brag. It's just the truth. I stepped in front of my mom, put my hands where they could see them, and told him again to put the knife away. He lunged not hard, but loud enough, and I wrestled him to the gravel. Leather scraped, a jar of marigolds toppled, and gravel kicked into the air like confetti at a funeral. When the commotion cleared enough for me to think, I saw the tall one backing up, eyes darting. The clipboards and badges and laminated sheets suddenly looked smaller. Someone started filming on their phone, and I recorded 2 voices in my head, the old one that says "don't make things worse," and the newer one that says "show the paper trail, get every second on camera." I had a chest cam in my work truck, a little thing my brother had once joked I was overprepared with, and I clicked record. We did what you should do when someone shows up to make you disappear. We made evidence. I called the sheriff, never took my eyes off the squat man, and kept talking like I knew exactly how this was supposed to play out, which, to be honest, I didn't. My hands were still shaking while I read off my name and the address, described the men, the knife, the threats. The dispatcher was calm. In that way, dispatchers are perfectly ordinary, while everything else is spinning. The sheriff showed up faster than I expected, lights soft in the road, boots on gravel, and that moment felt like a tide turning. They cuffed the squat man after watching the footage from my chest cam. The tall one tried to plead ignorance that if they'd had proper paperwork, they'd have come peacefully, and he was allowed to talk his way into a citation at best. They loaded the squat into the patrol car, and it hit me then. I wasn't just protecting Mom from a weird, petty harassment, I was pulling back a corner of a scheme. Turns out, our HOA inspectors weren't from any local association. They were contracted by a small development group, Hale and Row Development, that had been sniffing around county records, trying to find parcels that were neglected or ripe for community revitalization. It's the kind of euphemism developers love: community revitalization. They'd taken to sending private crews to intimidate older owners, to push them toward voluntary sales for pennies on the dollar. Maybe it worked in suburbs where neighbors don't talk, where old deeds are buried. Not here. Not Red Pine Hollow. That night, with the sheriff's lights fading and my mother's porch lamp glowing, I sat on the steps, and we drank tea like two criminals who'd gotten lucky. She looked at me with that stubborn, clean pride of someone who raised a man who could argue with polo shirts. "You always did have a temper," she said, and I laughed because it was true, and because laughter helps keep you from spiraling into the dark parts of what-ifs. For a second we let the small victories fill the room, but then I remembered the squeal of tires earlier, the black Escalade idling across the road, and I knew this was not over. They came back the next week, but not with polos. A black Escalade pulled into my neighbor's driveway like a shark sliding into a creek. Out stepped Marcus Hale, the developer himself, in a suit that cost more than my truck, with two broad-shouldered guys that looked like bad decisions given human form. He smiled like a man offering a partnership, but his eyes were sharpened with the kind of hunger legal pads can't cover. "We can make this very easy for you, Cal," he said, voice smooth. "A little land transfer, a small consideration, and we'll leave you the house. No fuss." The offer had the stink of betrayal in it. "Give up the lake, keep the porch." I told him we had no interest in selling. He shrugged, like any strong-arm artist does when a mark refuses. "You know how this works in other places. You make it difficult for the neighbors, some fines get piled on, property standards complaints start, it becomes a nightmare. You can do the hard way, or the easy way." He palmed a small slip of paperwork and pushed it toward my mother like it contained the cure for everything. My mother looked at him like he had asked her to bow. She folded the paper back up, tucked it into her apron, and spit out, "We have lived here longer than your father's money has been wet." Words got sharper. Marcus's men tried to move toward the house, and I stepped into their path. It was almost choreographed by now. One of his men made a move for my wrist. The other reached for a baton tucked under a jacket. I don't like hitting people if I can help it. I like stopping them. But this time one of them drew a compact pistol in the glint of a second, the kind people carry when they're hired to intimidate and taught not to think. You feel a different kind of fear when that metal shows up, the kind that isn't loud but has weight. I don't want to make this sound like a movie where I suddenly become a hero with perfect instincts. I was a man trying to keep a 90-year-old woman's steady breath from being interrupted. I grabbed the arm with the gun, twisted, and the thing skittered across the gravel. The sound metal on rock made everything hold very still. Marcus went from confident to pale. The two security guys were suddenly more interested in negotiating than in proving a point. The sheriff, maybe tipped by a neighbor who'd watched too many good bad men at a tractor sale, arrived in time to see the tail end of the scuffle, and that sight, lights, uniforms, the pistol on the ground, made Marcus and his men recede like wolves that smell a different pack. They left with threats hanging in the air like a bad smell. Marcus promised lawsuits, implied ruin, waved paper like a talisman of future harassment. But they left. The sheriff took statements, collected the recordings, and for the first time in weeks someone with authority looked at the pattern and said the words out loud. "This looks organized." They opened an investigation into coercion and unlawful intimidation. A year of quiet efforts by a development firm to clear small parcels with aging owners was suddenly messy and public. What I remember most after all that wasn't the scuffle or the sirens. It was standing on my mother's porch the next morning, the fog soft on the pines, and her saying, "We ain't selling, Cal. This land's crooked into our bones." I wanted to promise her something big like I'd keep it safe forever, but promises are heavy, and I have bills and a truck and the real world nudging me. Instead, I put my hand on hers and said, "We'll keep it as long as we can." And that, in the end, feels like more than enough for now. So, That's how Red Pine Hollow almost became another glossy lot in someone's portfolio. We didn't take the easy route. We recorded. We called the sheriff. We refused to be quietly pushed out. It worked, but the fight left edges you can still feel. There's a deeper question that sits in my belly when I think about it. Who gets to decide what community means? Is a community a neat subdivision with identical mailboxes? Or is it a patchwork of stubborn people and ramshackle barns and the graves of ancestors? Are we supposed to trade those stories for a clean HOA logo and a promise that someone else will manage our weeds? I don't have a tidy answer. What I do have is this. If a stranger comes to your land with a clipboard and the smell of someone else's idea of profit, film them, call the law, and insist on paperwork. More than that, talk to your neighbors. The thing these firms hate is being known and noticed. If you have an old person on a porch, sit with them and listen. There are probably more stories than you think. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Was there a moment you think I crossed a line, or a move I missed that would have made this cleaner? Leave a comment and tell me. I want to hear the heat of your take, the quiet of your logic, whether you think we did right or went too far. Like, share, and subscribe if you want more of these kinds of stories, and if you have your own, put it down below. This is messy stuff, and we could all use a little backup when property fights start looking like private security sales pitches.